2, 360.
Boom. Okay. What's up, everybody? We got Big Zach Attack, man. I'm so stoked, man, to have Big Zach. So let me give you guys some background here on a couple things. So first, let me just some quick background on the 360 movement, and then some quick background on Zach Attack. So started the 360 movement a couple years ago. It is a tribe of people that are serious about growing themselves in every single area of their life, all 360 degrees. Not just, okay, I'm a zillionaire or I'm a SME at my job, but man, how can I be a great husband, a great father, great at my job, great in my business, you know what I mean, financially, spiritually, just in every single area. And so that's what the tribe is all about, is adding value to more people. And specifically, I feel like God has called me to leaders and influencers. And so boom, as a result, through a buddy of mine at West Point, a guy named Eric Kober, super guy. He's like, hey, Noble, he PM'd me, hey, Noble, have you ever heard of this guy named Big Zach Attack? We call him Zach Thomas. I call him Zach Attack. And so I said, no. He's like, oh, man, he wrote this great leadership book. He's got the same vision as you do, all this stuff, be kindred spirits. And I said, dude, we'll connect us. If there's any chance you connect us. I called up Big Zach Attack. I said, bro, you don't know me from Adam's House Cat. And we talked for a hot minute. And honestly, and by God's grace, like, we just, I mean, have both been very intentional at really developing this relationship. And I will tell you, you know, I don't know how long we're going to go, however long Zach is going to give us here, but there's so many layers to Zach. His background, for those of you guys that saw the event on Facebook, in the 360 movement, personal growth tribe, he's went to West Point, was an infantry officer, and was an instructor at Ranger School, has done some stuff in ministry, has done, and I'll let Zach get into it, but also he's been a Chick-fil-A owner operator now for, I think, over a decade. And he may not say this, but one of the top 5% influencers in the entire chain of Chick-fil-A. And, I don't know how big Chick-fil-A is, but I've got a nose for two stores in any town I go into, Chick-fil-A and Mexican food. And so, and he's again, top 5% influencer in that chain. And he's written his own leadership book called Leader Farming. So I'm super excited to for Zach to share and stuff. And I've got a whole ton of questions, Zach, for you. That I'm really excited. But let me just open it up. Zach, you want to just introduce yourself and just share a little bit about yourself, and then we'll jump into it.
Sure. Well, thanks, Noble. It's an honor to be here with you guys. It's hard sometimes just listening to that stuff, because you could either sound like you're really successful or like totally dazed and confused and going from one thing to the next. Right. And so, for me, that's been kind of the story of my life. I would love to be able to say that I had it all scripted out and planned out, and that I knew exactly what I was going to do, but that wasn't the case. For me, I decided when I was about 7 years old when I decided I wanted to go to West Point. And so I did decide that early on. And, my plan though was to be a general in the Army. That was really what I planned to do. And then along the way, September 11th happened. I got stuck at TRADOC and Training Doctrine Command. Got stuck in the Ranger School as a Ranger instructor, and kind of got frustrated there, and said, well, I'm just going to get out. And I was going to pursue the chaplaincy. You mentioned the ministry. So that was my plan. I was going to go to seminary, go back in the Army as a chaplain. And I thought, all right, well, then I'll take this route and I'll just be a general chaplain and instead of an infantry officer. And then in the process of being in chaplain school and going to seminary, I started my own company. I started a coffee company called Ranger Coffee Company. And we ended up, it's kind of crazy. One day I was sitting in an aircraft hangar, getting ready to go on a jump. And I thought, man, if I could get more caffeine in one cup of coffee, I wouldn't have to pee as much. So I had created this hyper caffeinated blend of coffee, and we ended up selling coffee all over the world. We ended up in Newsweek magazine, on Good Morning America.
Okay, wait. So,
Yeah.
okay, so Zach, dude, so as an entrepreneur, bro, like, you're talking about it like you're changing your socks. And, okay, so you had this
Speaking of
thought.
socks, look at my socks, man. I got on Bob Ross socks. You like that?
That's awesome.
It says, "Here's a good place for my squirrel."
I love it. That's awesome. That's awesome. So you were literally like, okay, how can I get more caffeine in my coffee so that I can pee less? And then poof, you started a coffee company. Like, do you have a coffee background? How on earth did you go from thought to, implementation? That's crazy.
So no, I didn't really have a background in coffee. I just knew I loved coffee. And I had a friend, I just started having conversations. Some people, when they've got this idea, right? As an entrepreneur, they're like, I've got this big idea, but then they keep it to themselves and they don't tell anybody because they're afraid of somebody like stealing their idea or something. And I'm just, I just blab it out. I'm just like, hey, I got this idea. And then just honestly, by the grace of God, like somebody was listening and said, hey, I know this guy that roasts coffee. You should talk to him. And so I went and talked to a guy that had a coffee roastery there in Columbus, Georgia, right outside of Fort Benning. And his name was John Woodward. And John and I sat down. I said, look, here's my idea. Can you help me figure out how to do this? And he was like, yeah, we'll figure it out. So we put our heads together, and I mean, he was a master coffee roaster. He knew what he was doing. And we came up with a proprietary way to infuse additional caffeine in the roasting process. And it was like, well, I'm just going to build a brand. Right. And so, he had the technical side of it, which I know that part as well. But my job was just to build a brand. So I didn't roast coffee. I didn't even own a coffee roaster, but yet I created a brand that ended up all over the world. And it was crazy because honestly, some of it was just luck, or call it, God's intervention, which, I personally believe, but, some other folks may just call it luck. But we were right at the beginning of that whole caffeine craze, and we ended up in a segment on Newsweek with Monster Energy and, some of the drinks that you've heard of, like, Red Bull and stuff like that. And then I don't know if they just called those companies and they couldn't get anybody to talk. And then they called me, and, they called the phone number on my website, and they said, we need to speak with the president and CEO. And I'm literally driving down the road. I answered my cell phone, and I'm like looking around the truck, and I'm like, I guess that's me. I'm the president, CEO, and janitor and everything else, So, so that was really kind of how, and it just kind of blew up from there. And I just found myself managing a brand.
Now, had you always wanted to be an entrepreneur, or did you just kind of stumble into this?
I mean, I would say that I honestly kind of stumbled into entrepreneurship. I knew when I was a kid, I thought, I want to own my own business one day, but I didn't really know what that meant, and of course, then I decided I want to be a general in the Army, and I just thought, well, I'm just going to do that until I'm old. And, I thought like retiring at 42 was really old. But now that I'm 42 and I didn't actually stay until retirement, I'm like, man, that was not old at all. But, I really did just kind of stumble into it. There was a lot of just figuring it out as I went. And I knew that I wanted to be in business for myself, but not necessarily by myself. And I knew that I just wanted to influence others and help others. And so a lot of what I've done and accomplished has really just been by accident.
So boom, so you rolled into this Ranger coffee company.
Yep.
right? Boom, had this idea. You sat down and talked to sounds like a SME, subject matter expert. And so that's all prior to Chick-fil-A, right?
Correct. Yes.
So boom. So you took this coffee company to a global, literally, so worldwide, you're selling coffee around the world.
Mm-hmm.
Then what? So what happened after that? How'd you do that transition from Ranger Coffee Company to Chick-fil-A?
Yeah. So quick version is the economy crashed and people stopped buying expensive coffee. And I started looking at, okay, well, what am I going to do for income? And I was still in seminary. I was still planning on going back in the Army as a chaplain, but I had to find another source of income. I had to do something else. And I actually was doing some substitute teaching, which was not my strength. I was substitute teaching for like second graders, and it was awful.
Ranger Thomas as a second grade teacher.
Ironically, I don't know. This is the only part of that was good. So, my hometown, I'm from Cedartown, Georgia. Anybody ever heard of Sam Hunt? The famous country music, Sam Hunt. He's kind of pop country. He actually played at New Year's Rocking Eve in New York this past New Year's, like a week ago, whenever that was. Wow. So he's from Cedartown, and I was the substitute for his mom for like the assistant sub, because they each have a parapro, and I was her parapro for like a couple weeks, and I got to be good friends with his mom and good friends with the whole Hunt family as a result of that. So that's the only thing that I got out of being a substitute teacher.
That's awesome. Okay, and how long were you how long did you run Ranger Coffee before you transitioned out of Ranger Coffee?
Yeah, so I officially started the company like in 2005, and about 2.5 years of the company before the economy crashed, and then I started looking at something else, and then I got that's when I'll tell you this point of the story. So when I was in seminary, you have to have and in the chaplain candidate program, you have to have a job in ministry as part of your training. And so when I was down in Columbus, I was a college and singles pastor at a church, but then we decided to move back up to North Georgia to where my family is from. And I'd promised my wife, she has 3 brothers, and her middle brother had muscular dystrophy. And I promised her that if I ever got out of the military, even if it was for only a short period of time, that we would move back home close to family so you could be near your brother before he passes away. And he ended up passing away at 20. But we were home when that happened. But I had to get a job in ministry to stay in the chaplain candidate program. So there was a ministry that birthed out of North Point Community, Andy Stanley's church, called Life Impact. And the name of that is well knowable because now I'm the president of Life Impact as well. But Life Impact, Andy Christensen was the founder of Life Impact, and we partnered with churches to help them with their men's ministries. And they had partnered with our church down in Columbus, Georgia. And I just had that connection, and I just reached out to Andy and I said, hey, you got an opportunity there. And he brought me on board as the operations officer for Life Impact. I was literally just the second employee of Life Impact. It was very young and early on. And so one of my first job there at Life Impact was to show up at 5200 Buffington Road, which is the headquarters for Chick-fil-A Inc., and to help lead a business CEO roundtable. So Andy brought a bunch of business leaders together. It's called Wisdom Hunters is what it was called. And a guy by the name of David Salyers was our host for the day. And David is now retired and off on his own, but you may have heard of him. He wrote the book Remarkable. And it was kind of behind that whole thing with Chick-fil-A, the whole Be Remarkable. But yeah, so David was our host for the day. And I'll never forget, I was getting on an elevator, And we were going up to Truett's office to take a tour. And this lady steps on the elevator, and she was smiling from ear to ear. And I looked at her and I said, "Hey, is everybody here always this happy?" And she said, "Yeah, pretty much. It's kind of like Disney World." And everybody in the elevator laughs. And I just looked at my brand new boss, you know, Andy, and I said, "Hey, if this doesn't work out, I'm going to work for Chick-fil-A." And you know, everybody laughs again, and we were just kind of joking around. And so fast forward, that was in like May of 2007. And then in the end of 2007 was when the market crashed and the economy, you know, housing bubble burst. And the primary donor for our ministry that was providing my income went bankrupt. He was in real estate and he lost everything. And so Andy called me up and said, "Hey man, I love you. I care about you, but your check's in the mail and don't cash it when it gets there because there's no money in the bank account."
And when you say Andy
Christensen.
Okay.
Yeah. The president and founder of Life Impact.
Of Life Impact. Okay.
Yep. But Andy was, he told me, you know, "Hey, I can't, your check's no good. There's no money in the bank account." And so I was like, all right, I got to go back to the drawing board. I still have my coffee company, but you know, sales were dropping off drastically because of, you know, the economy and everything. And I was like, all right, what am I going to do? And then I remembered in that moment that time in the elevator when I said, "Hey, this doesn't work out. I'm going to work for Chick-fil-A." And it was like just an epiphany. And I put in my application to be a Chick-fil-A franchisee, and I got selected shortly after that, and took over an existing restaurant in Marietta, Georgia. It was the lowest volume freestanding Chick-fil-A in the state of Georgia. They called it the Dud Store. So it was tough. It had four franchisees in less than 10 years.
Wow.
The first one threw in the towel and said, "No, give me another store or I'm leaving." And he ended up relocating to a higher volume restaurant. And then the next two actually got terminated because their franchise agreement got terminated because they did some really stupid stuff. You know, they say, you know, you're pretty much good as a Chick-fil-A franchisee as long as you don't steal, sell chicken on Sunday. We call it the 3 S's, right? So steal, sell chicken on Sunday, or have sex with one of your employees. So the 3 S's. He did 2 of the 3. So I'll let you do the math and figure out which ones they were. But he didn't sell chicken on Sunday. How about that?
Oh, man.
So
okay. So let me back up a little bit. So my understanding, and again, I don't know a lot about Chick-fil-A other than the menu.
You know a lot about that, don't you?
I know a lot about the Chick-fil-A menu. So you acted like it's no big deal. From what I've heard, the hiring process is no joke, right? It's not like, "Oh, hey, Zach wants to own a Chick-fil-A. Here you go, Zach. You know, you get to own a Chick-fil-A." Like, it's a pretty extensive process, right?
It's pretty intense. I would tell you that last year, well, now it's year before last. I don't know the stats for 2019, but 2018, there were 77,000 expressions of interest. And of those 77,000, they selected 50 new franchisees. And they say the statistic I heard recently is it's 30 times harder to get selected by Chick-fil-A than it is to get into Harvard. 30 times harder than Harvard.
Wow.
So I tell people all the time, they're like, "Hey man, what's the magic bullet?" And I'm like, I don't know. Just if God wants you to do it, you'll get selected. That's my only explanation.
Okay. All right. So, but Zach, so you're being humble and modest again, and that's great. So also, dude, because I know you, I also happen to know that you have launched like 4 or 5 other operators, which again, like you just said, out of 77,000, you got 50 or whatever for you to have five. Because it's the other thing I understand is not all operators launch other operators. And also not all operators launch multiple operators. So, dude, what's the, like you say, you don't know the secret sauce, but clearly you got something more than Chick-fil-A sauce to develop leaders, bro.
That's good. I like that. I appreciate that, Noble. And you know, it's kind of like entrepreneurship. You know, for me, I do kind of just stumble into things. And you know, for this, one of those 50 that was selected last year was one of my people. And you know, when you consider there's almost 2,700 restaurants across the chain, you know, and of those 2,700 restaurants, only 50 of those restaurants had somebody get selected. You know, in fact, about 25 of those were external candidates that did not come from restaurants, and so only about 15 or what is that, 25 of the 50 were internal, that kind of grew up inside of Chick-fil-A, that were mentored. And so so yeah, I've produced 4 franchisees in less than 10 years, and then a 5th one just got selected for the leadership development program, and she should be on track within the next 18 months to be a franchisee. And so let me explain that a little bit. So the leadership development program is kind of a Chick-fil-A rite of passage. So it's just as competitive as getting selected to be an operator. So what they do is they predetermine, like, okay, are we okay with this person, you know, being a Chick-fil-A franchisee? And they're usually people that come from inside the organization, and they have the ability to move around the country and open new fresh restaurants. And so it's kind of a 18-month long use and abuse program, where they're like, hey, we know this person's capable of being an operator, but hey, we want to put you on our payroll for 18 months, and we want you to help us open restaurants across the chain. And so that's what they do. So she's in that program right now. So for the next, she's been in the program for about 4 months now. So for about the next year, she will continue to travel and open restaurants and take over existing restaurants that are transitioning and that sort of thing. And it's just it's an additional, it's like a tour of duty, you know, in the military. It's like, hey, we know you're solid, you're good to go. We're going to put you in this program, and we're going to deploy you for 18 months. And then, you know, then you'll get your store. So,
and how many stores do you think she'll hit, you know, for that experience during that 18, just if you had to ballpark it?
So some of them kind of get in the grand opening track. And if they're in the grand opening track, they're moving around about every 6 weeks. If they get stuck in the interim manager track, they may be somewhere for months at a time. So let's say, for example, if an operator retires, and then they need to kind of take that, the corporate has to take that restaurant back over and make sure that, you know, everything's good to go, and they restock all the small wares and all that kind of stuff. And they get, you know, a lot of times when an operator retires or leaves, a lot of people will leave with them. And so they have to rehire and get the systems and processes back up and ready to turn back over to a new franchisee. And so in those cases, they may spend, you know, 4, 5, 6 months in one location.
Got it.
Yeah.
Got it.
So it's really kind of a, you know, it's a crapshoot, you know, as to where they end up and how long they end up some certain places. But I mean, you kind of go back to your question. I made a decision early on that I was just going to develop people. And one of the biggest reasons, and it kind of goes to one of your questions. I was looking at your questions earlier. You know, one of the biggest challenges that most people have with developing people is really themselves, and getting out of the way and letting other people grow and develop and learn from their mistakes. But then in addition to that, like for me, I made a decision that I was going to let people go. And a lot of operators, a lot of franchisees, they don't want to let people go. They don't have this mindset that if I invest, I invested in you and I want you, to help me grow my business, and they're not willing to release them. And so I kind of call it my catch and release. I actually have right on my office wall right over there, I have a reel that came off of a rod and reel that belonged to my great grandfather. And it's a cool little thing to have, because it's my great grandfather's, but it's a visual reminder to me. It doesn't have a hook on the end of it. It's just, but it's just a cool reminder to me. It's that catch and release mentality that, I'm going to catch some great talent along the way, but my goal is to help them grow and become the best version of themselves and release them to do and become whatever it is that they're supposed to do and become. And, a team member motivated by, fear, force, guilt, or any other form of manipulation to try to get them to stay is not the same as a team member motivated by love or the knowledge that someone cares about them. And when people know that I love them, I care about them, and I have their best interest at heart, they are performing at such a higher level than those that feel like they're, whether you admit it or not, they know when they feel like they're being manipulated or coerced or guilted or that sort of thing.
Yeah, love it. Definitely agree that leading through love is much. It creates a different culture, environment, vibe, feel than leading through control, manipulation, fear, guilt. Like you said, there are some people, man, and it's been shocking to me. There are some people who, and I don't know if it's because they're used to it or what, whether or not they're aware that they're being controlled and manipulated, they stay in that environment. And it's shocking to me that, but I mean, we see it, we saw it in the military a lot. There were a lot of leaders. In fact, there's a commander that I've been talking to, a friend of mine, and one of her commanders is a complete bonehead. And, it's amazing the number of leaders that are in leadership that probably shouldn't be. You know what I mean? But I guess that being said, I feel like you are just on a whole different level. So to stay on the positive side, how have you done it? What is your thought? So you said your thought process, I like that, catch and release, but how have you been able to develop 4, soon to be 5 franchisees when the majority of franchisees haven't launched one franchisee?
Yeah. So just to kind of put that in perspective, statistically, I have 6 other franchisees on my operator team, and I'm the least tenured. I have the least, this year is my 12th year. In August, it'll be 12 years. Everybody's been around longer than me. Some guys 30, 40 years. One of those guys, one of those other 6, has produced one operator in 30 years. And and so I can speak, they won't ever watch this, so I can speak freely. But as I think about them, what is it and why is it that they didn't produce other franchisees? There's a couple things. Again, it goes back to they were so focused on their own results and their own business and what's in it for me kind of mentality, that they were not focused on how am I helping them grow and become the best version of themselves. And so that was part of it. And, I think about, for me and my people, how did I select those people? You know, what was it I was looking for? And I say this all the time, leadership starts in the heart, not when you receive a title or a position. And most of the time as leaders, we tend to select people, leaders for our organization based on skill and who's the best at what they do versus character and the heart. And so, you know, that's really kind of where it starts for me, is I'm looking at what's going on in here versus, you know, what's going on with these. And I think that's the big difference, because, you know, a lot of these guys, man, they've got some pretty amazing managers. I mean, in some ways better than I have, you know. I mean, they've got some amazing managers that manage their restaurants, and they don't have to do anything. They just collect a paycheck as an operator. But that's exactly what they are. They're managers. And when their manager is not there, their manager's out sick, or, you know, something's wrong where their manager can't physically be there, everything falls apart, you know. And everything, you know, it's a superhero, what I like to call a superhero system. And, you know, I talk about that in my book, but it's, you know, it's we base our organization based on hiring superheroes versus, you know, the systems and processes. And I, you know, in the military, we used to say mission first, people always, right? Well, you know, I say systems first, people always, right? And so, you know, the mission takes care of itself when you're focused on the right things, but it's systems first. We have to put the system first. We have to, you know, what is it that we need to do to be successful? Because we are going to embrace turnover. We're going to let people leave. And so the moment that we create an organization where people feel like that things have to rely on them, we're going to fail, because when they're not there, when they leave, things fall apart, right? And so I tell my leaders all the time, replace yourself as soon as possible. You will not lose your job. I promise. You will elevate yourself to the next level. And so they're constantly trying to figure out ways to replace themselves. And I mean, it's like when my top leader left in October to go to LDP, we didn't skip a beat, you know. And she wasn't insulted by that. She wasn't like, oh, you know, it didn't even hurt him when I left. She was like, no, I've done my job. I've replaced myself.
Okay, money. Now, so I want to go back a little bit, and you breezed over it, but I think it's a critical component to your success, and honestly, to success in a lot of businesses. So for those of you that are, you know, watching this live or the recording, I think a lot of people think about actions on the objective, using a military term, and not about we would call PCIs or pre-combat inspections. So for you, and just using the business analogy here, you have some tremendous leadership philosophies. Again, I've been blessed to hear a lot of your, you know, just in a lot of conversation over the past year with you. One thing that you said that I think is critical in business is the hiring process, right? If you're hiring scrubbalicious and thugalicious, and you try to apply your ninja philosophies of leader development and replace yourself and catch and release and all these different things, you're not going to be as effective. But on the front end, you take time and intention to make sure you're hiring the right person to be developed, right? Am I smoking the good stuff, or am I mean, you don't just hire anybody into your store. I mean, just you said right there earlier on, you don't just look for skill set, and which is a lot of people like, oh, they've got the skill set, they went to Harvard, or they went, you know, some Ivy League, or they've got these skill sets. You look at the intangibles.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Right. That matters, right? That's an important piece.
Yeah. There's a process that we use, and I could go into that in detail if you'd like, but I'll spare you the details for now. And if you want to know more, I'm happy to share. But we have a 3-step. This is what's crazy. People get blown away in our interview process. They're like, man, I thought I was just coming to get a job at a fast food restaurant. But we have a 3-step interview process where there's an open group interview. We do it the first Monday. In fact, it was today at 9 a.m. and 4 p.m. And you can just walk in and interview. We have a process for that where my leaders know kind of what to look for. And then we determine whether they get invited.
Wait. Now, I got 2 questions real quick. One is this 3-step thing. Is this a Zach thing when you say we, or is this a Chick-fil-A thing?
It's a Zach thing.
This is so not the rest of Chick-fil-A doesn't do this.
Well, I mean, some of them do because I've actually outlined this process, and it was highlighted at one of our national level conferences, and so there are quite a few folks that have adopted it.
Wow. Okay, so that's number 1. So this is a Zach thing. Number 2 is at this first open interview process. So the 9 a.m. and 4 p.m. thing. Are you there, or is that facilitated by your leaders?
No, I'm not there. So they basically, as people come in, we have a website where they go and ahead of time, like if they want to come to the group interview, we tell them that they need to fill out the application online. Well, if they haven't filled it out when they get there, it's no big deal. We just give them the card and tell them to go fill it out later. We go ahead and take them through the interview process, which is it's a group process where, again, I don't know if you want to get in all the nitty gritty details, but it's we have a questionnaire where we ask them, we have a piece of paper. They have several questions on there. One of those questions is, like, why do you want to work here? And then I think one of the key elements that's different about this questionnaire is we break things down into 3 categories with their references. We say, category A is coach, teacher, or previous employer. And the reason we do coach, teacher is because some people, it's their first job in our area of the business, or area of business. So coach, teacher, previous employer. And we have 3 blanks there for references. And then we have mentor or peer as the second B level. And that we have 2 blanks there for references. And then the third one is friend or family member, because we don't really care what your friend or family member has to say. And we only have 1 blank there. And then we tell them, like, if we can't get a hold of at least 2 people in category A and 1 person in category B, you will not move on to the next phase of the interview process. And then we say, and then on this questionnaire, it says, when we call these people, how will they answer the following questions? What are you good at? What are you not so good at? I actually had somebody answer that question one time, manual labor. Great. Thanks for saving me the time. I don't have to interview you. But it's, what are you good at? What are you not so good at? And how would they rate you on a scale of 1 to 10? How would they rate you on a scale of 1 to 10?
Wow.
And then they know, like, I'm going to call these, or I'm not calling them. One of my leaders is going to call them and ask them these questions. And so there's a few other questions on there. Like one that we ask, who's your hero and why? And then, we of course say, why do you want to work here? And that's really the bulk of it.
That's phase 1. That's the first step.
That's phase 1. Yep. And then, and if we have a large enough group, so this is kind of a cool thing that we do. If we have a large enough group, what we'll do is we'll just tell, like, they'll all be writing, scrambling on their piece of paper, and we'll just say, all right, stop what you're doing. And we'll say, everybody leave everything on the table and follow us outside. You're not allowed to talk. We want you to arrange yourselves in alphabetical order by last name without talking. And we just stand back and watch and see what happens. And it's a pretty neat experience. You get to see the natural leaders rise to the top. They'll pull out their phone and type, we didn't tell them any rules other than you can't talk. So they'll, or somebody will have a pen, they'll write their letter on their hand, or, and then you'll see like the people that are just kind of a stump on a log. They just kind of stand there like an idiot and they don't know what's going on. And then you see guys like, people like, hey, I figured this thing out. Let me help you. And then they start moving people around, and then honestly, we don't really care whether they got in alphabetical order or not, because we can just tell, we can see what we were looking for, just watching the process. And then they go back inside and we say, okay, if you're sitting next to somebody that move, and we want you to sit next to or across from someone that you've never met before. And then we say, we're going to give you 3 minutes to introduce yourself to your new friend. And then we're going to give you 1 minute to tell us why we should hire your new friend. And so you get to see a lot of things in that, right? You get to see whether, they're willing to stand up and talk about somebody else, and why we should hire this person that they don't even know, or, whether they're going to stand up and just talk about themselves. Right. And you get to see, you kind of get to see the heart a little bit in that. And then that's just the first phase. That's just the first phase of the process. The second part is then we invite them back for a round robin interview with my core leaders. So I have 5 people on my core leadership team that some of them are college graduates. Some of them are, know way more than most college graduates. And if that makes sense. And they're just amazing leaders. And so, but it's like, this is their turf, right? And this is they're gonna vet these people. And so they have a round robin, and they have their own questions. I don't even tell them what to ask. I don't even know what they ask. I don't even care what they ask. But they have their own questions. They have certain questions they want to ask these people. And they have like a little, it's kind of like speed dating, and they'll just bounce from one to the other. And one of them has this little box of wooden toys that you have to organize in a certain color and a certain category and all that. And we're able to kind of see their attention to detail. And then one of them has this little speed test that they do for detail and organization and stuff. And we time that, and we've got years worth of records to kind of see what is good. So it's this little quiz thing. It's got, so for example, it may have, 0.66696 and then 0.66966. And you have to, and there's like 20 of these, and you have to quickly just write an S or a D, whether that's the same or different. And you have less than a minute. We stop the clock at a minute. And so if you get it done in less than a minute, we write down your time, but then we stop you at a minute to see how far you got and then whether it was accurate or not. And so we're tracking again for attention to detail and that sort of thing. And this is all, again, this is not Chick-fil-A stuff. This is all what we do. And so then that's the second phase. And then they kind of collaborate. They get together and say, okay, who are we going to send on to Zach for the third interview? So like, I don't even see them till the third interview. And honestly, by the time I see them, I mean, unless, and of course, references have been called and all that kind of stuff. So by the time I see them, unless there's some major red flag that I see in the process of interviewing them, I just get the opportunity to welcome them to the team. Like, I like to be the one that says, hey, welcome aboard. I will ask them a few questions. I'm looking for major red flags and trying to see if there's anything my team missed. But for the most part, their batting, average is pretty good. So that's the process that I developed. And that, again, I mean, it's intense, but that's where it starts. It starts at selection.
Right. That's right. Well, and they get a vibe, you know what I mean, of your culture from Jump Street. I mean, I love that. Okay, and I won't go into the details here because I want to ask you a couple of the high level business questions. But another thing that I love that you do that you did not share here, but you've shared with me, is your vision and values. I love that your onboarding process. Once they get hired, boom, you sit down with them, and you're doing this. You're the one that's imprinting your vision and values of your organization into those employees and stuff. Now, is that, let me ask you this: is that vision and values, is that a Zach thing or is that a Chick-fil-A thing?
So the term vision and values is something that Chick-fil-A does as a whole. In fact, they do that with all of their new corporate staff members, and Dan actually personally usually drops into that. Dan Cathy, and he will spend some time with those folks, during their vision and values. And so that actual term, but what that looks like, is vastly different across the board. I would say that probably less than 10% of restaurants that I even know of do it, right? I mean, there's a couple videos you can watch that kind of tell the story of Truett, and there's different things out there, but for the most part, I don't even know another operator that does it, that does vision and values like I do. And I spend 3 hours with every new team member, sitting here in my office. We have a boardroom next door, and my goal is literally to get them to cry by the time we're done with the 3 hours.
And what do you mean by that?
So I tell them some pretty realistic stories about how, so by the end of the session, the 3 hours, my goal is to tug on their heartstrings enough to where they make the connection that this is not just a job, but this is an opportunity to make a difference in people's lives. And so the way I do that is, and you've been a part of this exercise before, one of the things that I do is I make them take out a blank note card and draw a tombstone. And I say, I want you to write your name at the top of the tombstone. I want you to put, the year you were born and put a dash and stop right there and don't predict when you're going to die. But, and then I want you to take and write your epitaph. All right. So that phrase, that thing that's at the bottom of a tombstone is what we call your epitaph. And it's this sentence or phrase that represents your life. And when you are no longer here, people are going to say something about you. What is it that you want them to say? And so I give them some time to do that, maybe play some soft music, and then they do that. And then of course I don't make them share, but if they want to share, and usually they do, but most of them, they've never done anything like that in their life. They've never, written out their epitaph. And so then I tell them, okay, well, flip the card over. And this time I want you to draw a tombstone, and I want you to do, and we have fun with it. I say, do your best effort at drawing a little Chick-fil-A logo on the top of your tombstone, because this is your Chick-fil-A tombstone. And you're going to put your name, and you're going to put today's date, and you're going to put a dash, and hopefully it'll be later than tomorrow, because hopefully you'll last more than one day. And so, and then I kind of joke around. We have fun with it, but I say, and so this is your Chick-fil-A epitaph. The reality is that, nobody in this room wants to work for Chick-fil-A for the rest of your lives. I don't even want to work for Chick-fil-A the rest of my life. Not until the day before I get put in the casket. Okay. So, what is it, no matter what is it you want people to say about you when you no longer work here? Because that day is going to come. Your last day at work is going to happen. And when you leave, people are going to say things about you. Are they going to say, man, I'm glad she's gone because we had to work twice as hard when she was here? Or are they going to say, man, we're really going to miss him. He was awesome. Man, he just added, when he came in the room, he brought, sunshine and rainbows, and Moses looks like a guy that brings sunshine and rainbows every time he walks in the room, right? So
You nailed it, man. You nailed it.
So, but yeah, so, it's what do you want people to say about you when you're gone, when you no longer work here? And so just kind of mentally taking them that place. And I challenge them, like, look, take this card and stick it on your bathroom mirror so that you see it every day when you brush your teeth, at night and in the morning. Hopefully you brush your teeth, right? And so, you got it posted right there on your bathroom mirror so you see it every day. What is it you want people to say about you when you're dead and gone? Or what is it you want people to say about you when you no longer work for Chick-fil-A? And so, I take them there, but then the last thing I conclude with is I tell them the story about a lady named Susan. It's a true story about a customer that I had that I'll fast forward and give you the gist of it. But she had lost her husband, lost her job. Her car was broken down the day before she came in the restaurant. And the way that we treated her changed her life. She later told me that she considered killing herself the night before she walked into Chick-fil-A, and she was treated in such a way that she thought, maybe there are people in this world that care about me. And it was that she said, okay, I'm going to come back here again tomorrow because these people care. And then she came back the next day, and then she came back the next day, and she kept postponing taking her own life until one day she realized, like, okay, I'm not going to do this anymore because these people have made my life better. And so I tell that story because I want them to see that it's so much more than about selling a chicken sandwich. It's an opportunity to make a difference in people's lives. And I say this all the time. I say, when I'm 85 years old, sitting on my front porch in my rocking chair, what am I going to be thinking about? It's not how big my house is, because I'll probably live in a nursing home. It's not what kind of car I drive, because I probably won't even have a license at that point. It's not how much money's in my bank account, because I have 7 kids and they'll probably have spent all that, right? So it's going to be, what did I do with the time, money, and resources I was given to make a difference in people's lives? That's all that's going to matter. And so, that's our vision for our organization. Make a difference. Your first question on here, what's my purpose and mission in life? It's, my epitaph is, he lived, he loved, he made a difference. That's it. Like, that's what I want people to say about me. I lived, I loved, I made a difference. It did just say made a difference. And I went back and added, he lived and he loved, because being an achiever, man, I can make a difference, dude. I can totally kill myself making a difference. And so I had to put that in there. Like, I have to live and love and make a difference too.
That is awesome. Absolutely love that. That is super powerful. It's neat because, what you said, earlier on, that you look for heart and character, and that is what you weave in through your whole hiring process, is heart and character. Like, you're modeling what you're looking for, everything that you did. And yeah, there's some, some attention details. So there's some practical stuff that you're looking for as well, of course. But man, so much, like, what I got, the vibe I got from your hiring process and how you develop leaders, it all stems from heart and character. And here's what's even super cooler, that maybe some of you guys who don't know Zach have the privilege of knowing Zach, is, if you get a chance, to read his book, Leader Farming, you haven't always been like this.
No, no.
Right. You had, so we're getting a chance to hear from Zach 2.0. Zach 1.0 did not have the same vibe, right?
No, not at all. Yeah, I share that journey in my book about how, there you go. Look at that, Alex. He's got it. And so I share that journey of what I call the pendulum. You know, my idea of what a leader was supposed to be, being in the military and being a ranger instructor. Like, I had to put the fear of God in people. I had to make people cry for their mother for a living. That's what that's what I felt like I had to do. And when I made my transition to the ministry, I developed this philosophy that, I just I gotta love everybody enough and they'll do the right thing. And I got taken advantage of pretty significantly, especially early on in my Chick-fil-A journey. I had people toting chicken out the back door, stealing from me. And it was pretty brutal financially. And I knee-jerk reacted. And so you imagine this pendulum that's over here, this hard charging airborne ranger kind of guy, to this pastor, love everybody enough, they'll do the right thing. And then, I get taken advantage of. So I'm like, all right, you want the ranger? I'll give you the ranger. And I, swung the pendulum all the way back over to the other side. And I became this Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde kind of leader, because I'd get over here and I'd be like, I don't want to be that guy. I really don't want to be that guy. So then I'd swing all the way back to the other side. And then I'll never forget, I overheard one of my team members say one day, I wonder which Zach we're going to get today. And I was like, oof, that hurts. And I didn't want to be that guy either. And so out of that, I developed this mantra. It's called, it's actually a Latin phrase. I've been pronouncing it wrong for years. My daughters take CC, classical conversations, just like, I think we got some CC folks in here. And so, and they take Latin, and my daughter corrected my pronunciation. So, but I used to say it's esse quam videre, which is Latin for to be rather than to appear. And so, for me, that's my mantra. Like, I want to be who I say I am, and not a poser, not someone that, says this and does something else, or like someone that is this way at work, but this way at home, or this way at work, but this way at church. I want to be the same person all day, every day, no matter where I am, no matter what I'm doing. I want to be who I say I am. And so, that's where I had to find this balanced approach to leadership, where I could literally hold people accountable, but not, be a jerk. And so, I go through that whole process and outline all that in the book, and how I did that myself. But, I call it, freedom with boundaries, right? And, you give people boundaries, but yet there's freedom within those boundaries. And you extend grace and you extend trust, but yet, there may be a time where I may have to come up to somebody, because I've got clear accountability. I may have to come up to you and say, I'm sorry, Noble, you can't work here anymore. I love you. I care about you, but you can't work here anymore. And here's why. And I can do it in that tone without being a jerk, and without screaming and yelling and throwing stuff and, being, somebody that I don't want to be. And so that's, I found that I had to find that balanced leadership approach to where I could hold people accountable, but yet still love them and care about them and teach them. And that's what I found in a lot of what leadership is like. It's like parenting, right? You think about, and I do make this analogy in the book, and I talk about it, like my 2-year-old son, right? When he was 2 years old, he's 7 now, but when he was 2, he went over to an electrical outlet and he had a paper clip in his hand, and he was getting ready to stick it in the electrical outlet. And I was like, whoa, don't do that. And if I'd have just gone over to him and picked him up and said, oh, son, I love you so much. Please don't ever do that again. Like, do you think that would work? I mean, maybe, but I'm like, I want to make sure he's never going to do this again, right? And so, I spanked his hand really good, and I'm like, son, don't ever do that again. And all he needs at this point, he's 2. Like, he doesn't fully understand my love for him, right? And so he's 2. He needs to associate pain with that little smiley face looking thing on the wall, because that could kill him. He doesn't even understand that. Like, I'm not going to go over and explain electrical theory. Like, current will run through your body and stop your heart. Like, he doesn't need to understand that. So I have, things in my business where, we have a point system, a disciplinary point system where, people just need to know the standard. And when they first, even though I do vision and values and I tell them all this stuff, at first they don't truly get it. I tell them the point. So here's one for you. You ready for this? The point of the point system is not to point you out, but to keep you on point till you see the point, right? So the purpose of the point system is not to get you fired, but to keep you on point, to help you stay aligned with the expectations of what it means to be a great Chick-fil-A team member until you see the point, until you see the big picture, until you see like the reason for all of this stuff. And so it's just like, my goal with my son is not to spank his hand every time he does something wrong until he's 21 years old, right? Like, I want my relationship to grow and develop with my son to where, he can come to me and say, Dad, I made a mistake. I screwed up. He's 18 years old, went to a party, got drunk. He can pick up the phone and call me and say, Dad, I made a mistake. I'm drunk. Can you come pick me up? Instead of that fear and then he's going to get behind a wheel and put his life at risk because he's afraid I'm going to beat the crap out of him, right? And so somewhere between 2 and 18, my relationship with my son has transitioned to one from fear and discipline to him understanding my love and care for him. And so there's so that's where most leadership gurus, they don't really get it. Like, a lot of military guys are all about discipline and, structure and fear and blah, blah, blah. Right. And then you got this new movement of servant leadership and, just love everybody enough and blah, and the reality is they're both wrong. It's when you think about parenting, if you're a parent, you will understand what I'm saying. There's a time for discipline, but then there's a transition that you have to make, and you want them to do the right thing because they know that you love them. And you apply that to the context of business, and that's all I'm doing. I'm just parenting these people.
Yeah, it to the point of where some of them can be parents themselves, right? In the case of franchisees and stuff. Okay, now let me switch gears a little bit. What's been the toughest thing that you have faced in your business career as an entrepreneur?
I mean, I think I spoke to this a little bit earlier, but I mean, the toughest thing has been me getting out of my own way, and just really, you talk about it too all the time, Noble. I mean, it's your emotional growth journey. Like, that's the hardest thing. And learning enough about yourself to be able to help other people. And, I wish I had a sexier answer, but that's, that's really it. Right.
No. And I would agree, as a 20+ year entrepreneur myself, multiple different industries, multiple different business partners, that kind of thing. Yeah, man, the hardest thing for me has been the dude in the mirror.
Yeah.
The military, we call it, there's a term called LIMFAC, limiting factor.
Yeah.
And insert my name in the,
Yep.
Okay. So again, switch gears here, writing a book. What's it like?
It's probably one of the hardest things that I've done.
Really?
I'd rather go back to Ranger School again.
You're kidding me.
No, it was hard for me because I'm ADD, and I'm like, it's hard for me to sit down and write. And so my process for writing my book, I started writing, and I wrote and I wrote and I wrote. And then I found this guy named Jared, who's my co-author, and I was like, okay, I'm going to hire him to be my coach, because he's written multiple books and he's a publisher and he's helped people write books. And so I hired Jared to kind of coach me and help me. And so then I kept writing, and we were working together, but I was the first person he'd ever really, like coached through writing. And then that wasn't working that well because I wasn't, again, I couldn't stay focused. And so I'm much better at talking than I am at writing. Maybe y'all figured that out tonight. So, but what I finally came to a conclusion with Jared, I said, all right, look, here's what we're going to do. If this works for you, I said, I've got an hour commute every day to and from my restaurant. I'm going to call you, and we're going to record this call, and I'm just going to start talking about, my stuff and my journey and all this. And so Jared is like, he's recording it, he's taking notes, he's doing. And so for over a year, that's what we did. And I'm just talking this stuff out. And then he's got all this content, all this stuff, and then finally one day, like we had a book. It was probably going to be like a 1,000-page book. Like, it was ridiculous. As much content as we had. And I'm like, nobody's going to read a 1,000-page book. And so, I remember exactly where I was. I was in a Sprouts. You guys know what a Sprouts is? It's a Sprouts. I was driving down the road, and I saw a Sprouts, and it was a farmer's market kind of place, and I said, I'm going to pull in here just for inspiration. Like, I'm writing a book called Leader Farming, and I'm like, I'm just going to go to this farmer's market, and I'm just going to look around. And I was actually I was kind of looking for a logo idea or, something to hit me. And I got out of the car, went in the farmer's market, walked around, looked. I don't even remember what I got out of that. Came back to the car, and before I cranked the vehicle up, it hit me like I had the outline for the book. It was just I grabbed the closest piece of paper, and I just started frantically outlining the book. And that's when I came up with the framework for sustainable business and the concentric circles and all that, and the FARM, FARM, breaking it down into freedom, leading, acknowledging the seasons, embracing turnover, risk taking, and making a difference. And so, all that just brain dumped in an organized fashion. And divine intervention, I don't know. But that was, and then I sent that to Jared. I was like, look, here it is. Like, take all this content and put it in this format. And this is our book. This is the book. And then we went back and forth. My wife hated Jared Stump. She was just like, if that guy is, and Jerry knows him. I see Jerry there. My wife absolutely hated him because I was on the phone with him until 2:00 in the morning, multiple times a week. And then he's actually engaged to his wife, Allison. And she would say that, that I was his, I forget what she said, something like, are you talking to your other partner or whatever? and it was like, we were on the phone so much, hashing this stuff out back and forth. And it was a brutal process, but we did it. And I'm pretty proud of it. Still got a bunch of typos in it, but we're, and I'm actually, on Friday of this week, I'm going down to Columbus, Georgia, to a recording studio of a friend of mine that used to play. He was a temp. He played with Casting Crowns. He's good friends with those guys, and he's got a recording studio. So I'm recording the audio version of Leader Farming starting this Friday.
That's awesome.
So
that's exciting. And,
yeah.
you know, and I'll tell you, man, it was such a blessing. If you have not read Leader Farming, I highly recommend it. So thank you for going through the brutal process of a year of you know, putting out the content, organizing it, everything, because you know, there's some phenomenal concepts in there. I love your seasons of leadership was another huge concept. Oh,
seasonal growth mindset. Yep.
Yeah, seasonal growth mindset. So, you know, just kind of staying on the entrepreneur theme here, can you share, and I think this is part of your interview. I don't remember if you do this during your interviews, but one of the questions that you like asking when you say freedom or security,
Mm-hmm.
right? Could you expound on that? You know, when they typically answer security, this is, you know,
Okay. Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah. So I talk about the entrepreneurial scale of, and I talk about that in Leader Farming. So just imagine this scale. I got a poster board of all my graphics, right? So there's the scale. Just imagine this scale with the center of it in the middle. You got 5 this way and 5 this way, right? So this way is security. This way is freedom. So then when you ask yourself the question, you know, which one do you desire more, security or freedom? Most people that are entrepreneurial value freedom over security. Now, the irony of this whole thing is, you know, I think a lot of you guys, including myself, you know, are former military, and, you know, a government job is probably the most secure thing that you can have, you know. Government job on that far end of that scale of security, like that is, I'm not going to do anything to grow myself. I'm just going to rely on this government paycheck, these government benefits. You know, that's the far side of that spectrum. The other side of the spectrum is, you know, entrepreneur has absolutely no security whatsoever. There's no 401k. There's no government pension. There's no medical benefits. There's none of that, right? And so they desire risk and freedom over security. They're making a choice, right? So everyone chooses at some point in their life which one they desire more, security or freedom. That is kind of where you fall on that scale. So then it's an imaginary scale, right? But just, so that's the question you ask yourself. Where am I on that scale? Am I more towards the security side, and I'm not willing to jump out of the airplane? I'm not willing to let go of this security blanket that I have? Or you desire freedom more, because when you're in this security side, somebody else is dictating your schedule, right? Somebody is telling you when to do, what to do, you know, government 9 to 5, you know, that sort of thing. The other side of that spectrum, right? Nobody tells you what to do and when to do it and where to be or how to be it, you know. And so anyway, that's that spectrum.
But you know, it's interesting, that dynamic, and I'm going to transition another one kind of along the theme there into homeschooling. Why did you guys choose? Because I've got a little theory going here, a little running theory, and I didn't even want to lead you, so I want to just see how you respond to this. But why did you guys decide to homeschool?
First and foremost, it was kind of an argument with my wife. I wanted to homeschool. My wife did not want to homeschool. Obviously, it was going to be all on her, but she, well, it wasn't all on her, and it's not now, but she felt like it was all going to be on her. and she didn't want to do it because she grew up in a public school background. So did I. Her mother is a public educator. Our sister-in-law is a public educator. So we're surrounded by public educators. And then, initially the first thing was like, hey, you turned out okay, or, why would you want to do that? So for us, the initial interest in homeschooling was we have 7 children. And so we at the time we had 4, or we were about to have our 4th, and we kind of saw actually we did have 4. We saw the writing on the wall. It was like, we're going to have one in high school, 1 in middle school, and 2 in elementary school, all at the same time. And we're going to be running around like chickens with our heads cut off, trying to be at this thing and that thing and this thing and that thing. And it was just busyness. I say busyness is the new stupid, right? And so it's just crazy insanity, the amount of junk that the public school requires you to do nowadays. And it wasn't even about the Common Core. Yeah, it wasn't necessarily about that as much as it was just like, we just saw the writing on the wall with the craziness, and we said we want to just spend more time with our kids. And we wanted to have, this goes back to your question right before this, we wanted to have freedom, right? We wanted the freedom. Like, I'm taking a month off this year. I'm taking 27 days, and I'm coming to see you in Colorado. But yeah, so I'm taking 27 days, and we're driving to California, and we're taking the kids to Disneyland, and then we're driving back through Colorado, and because I can, because I can, and because I want to, and that's the plan. I mean, it is going to be during the summer, just because we don't want to get snowed in anywhere. But we would have the flexibility to do that during the school year if we wanted to. And so, that's a big piece of it. Like, we wanted the freedom to be able to go. We take our vacation soon as school goes back. Like, we look at the school calendar, and as soon as public school goes back, that's when we take our summer vacation. And we're like chilling on the beach with nobody. We go to the restaurants. The restaurants are still open. All the good restaurants are still open. And we don't have to wait 2 hours, to get seated. And so, yeah, so that was the initial, like, that's how I got my wife to buy into it. But then, once I kind of got into this, I started seeing like, wow, like I can tailor my kids' education, and I can help them not become indoctrinated by the system. Like, the fact that public school is all about creating employees for factories, really. And then there's this thing that, like, you got to go to school, you got to get good grades so that you can get into a good college, and then go to 4 years of school to get a degree, to get some other job, which you probably won't get, and you'll have to move back in with your parents. And I just made a decision, like, look, I don't really even care if my kids go to college. Like, I want them to get an education, but I don't care if they go to college or not. I just want them to learn. I want to learn how to learn. I want to teach them how to be an entrepreneur. Like, my kids have already started several businesses, and that's part of the process of their education is learning how to start and run and make, businesses.
So you nailed it, and I didn't even lead you. So that worked out great.
Yeah.
I honestly, now again, so I haven't studied this, I haven't done any research, but as a, so now we're 7-year homeschool family, and we're in a pretty big, so, as classical conversations is a pretty big deal, but it's all, kind of community based. So being in the homeschool world for 7 years now, 7.5 years now, it seems to me, just my guesstimation, and it'd be fun to hear your guesstimation, you being in a homeschool world now for a handful of years. It seems like 40 to 50% of homeschool families are entrepreneurs. From a little home-based business to a little network marketing business, to a craft business, to I've met guys like you, ballers. Like, there's a homeschool family in New Mexico that produces like 60% of the onions and chili for the country. They like huge entrepreneurs that, boom, they homeschool. For me, it's easy to make the bridge. What homeschooling is to education, entrepreneurship is to the job world.
Yep.
Right? It's countercultural. It's to be an entrepreneur, you have to think for yourself. You've got to, you know what I'm saying? You've got you're the buck stops with you, not my boss, not my whatever. It stops with me as an entrepreneur. And same thing with homeschooling. Who's the principal? My wife and I. Who's the teachers? My wife and I. Like, the buck stops with us. And again, as a homeschooler and as an entrepreneur. So this is another question I want to ask you, but again, it's counter-cultural, right? All of society, well, you're crazy if you homeschool. You're crazy if you want to own your own business. That's that's crazy talk. So kind of the next thing is, how do you handle haters? Whether it's homeschooling, they think you're crazy for homeschooling. They think you're crazy for being an entrepreneur. Now, obviously, you're seasoned, so you probably don't get as much haterade as you used to. But early in your days, how did you, as an entrepreneur / homeschooling, how have you handled the haters?
So going back to the freedom versus security scale, right? I mean, it's simply just looking at this person and understanding that they just value security way more than freedom. Even though they're hating on you because you value freedom more than security, like, you can't just return hate with hate, right? Like, you can't just be like, well, just because you value security more than me doesn't make me diss or down you. Like, I understand why you want your kid to go to school and and get good grades so they can get into a good college so that they can get some job somewhere, right? Like, I mean, I understand that. And it's because of your value system. I think just having that perspective has really helped me be tolerant of others that don't think the way I do, that don't value the same things that I value.
For me, it's a matter of worldview. Like you said, we value different things, and that's super cool. If you value what society values, grades, and how does your kid stack up to my kid and all that kind of stuff, that's totally fine. I don't care how my kid stacks up with your kid. I don't care if my kid gets into Yale or Harvard or doesn't get into Yale or Harvard. For me, I wanted my kid exposure to an entrepreneur thought process, right, where the world is her classroom, and everyone can be a teacher, not just Mr. Jones or Mrs. Jones with an education degree. I can learn from the janitor down the street. I can learn from, a peer. I can, right? I wanted the world to be here. My wife is a missionary kid. So she literally grew up in other parts of the world. Yep. You want to talk about education?
Yeah.
How do you define education? You know what I mean? Like, and then as an entrepreneur, again, we have to be, I think, to be a successful entrepreneur, and it's just my 2 cents, you have to be growth minded. You have to be. If you have a fixed mindset as an entrepreneur, you are done before you get started. And I think as a for us as a homeschoolers, man, for us anyway, I wanted my kid, again, like you, I wanted her to not have a box around her education. That, okay, the bell just rang. Oh, you got 5 minutes to walk over to math. You know what I mean? Oh, the bell just rang. Okay, now you walk over to. Yeah. I wanted her to have no box, and the world is her classroom. And like you said, our daughter's 12, and she's had 3 or 4 different businesses.
Well, think about it like this: all those people, we need employees, right?
Well, and you said it too. Honestly, the American education system, like, that's what it was designed to do, was to create followers. And you know what I mean? You've got, and the math is 14,400 hours from K through 12th grade. 14,400 hours of modeling with one teacher, and 30 students / employees, right? That's the model. It's literally the job model for 14,400 hours. And you can't tell me that you are not going to be influenced by investing 14,400 hours into anything. You are going to get influenced.
You're going to be indoctrinated is what you're going to be.
Right. That's exactly right.
And the crazy thing is, I mean, it's funny, you and I both, and many of you here, military, I mean, we were part of the world's greatest indoctrination system, right? And so, how did we break free? How did we, and again, that begs the question, like, okay, well, why am I different? Like, and that's something that I ask myself all the time. Like, you go through this life cycle of entrepreneur is like, you initially just start thinking, okay, I can't do this anymore. Right. And then you're like, okay, now am I weird or is everybody else weird? And then you're just like, okay, well, it is what it is. And you start embracing who you are. And you're like, all right, well now, and then you begin to see the error of your ways. Like, okay, well, man, I almost ended up, stuck in a job for the rest of my life. It's amazing, when you think about that. And honestly, I think that it's, inherently, it's part of who we should all be, like to our core, we're designed to be free, right? But yet we put ourselves in a box, and we put our own limits on ourselves. And then, God doesn't necessarily force us out of that. He lets us just kind of be who we are. It's kind of a mind-boggling thought when I start thinking about entrepreneur versus, employee. And then, like, we need both to make the world go round, right? We do. And so we can't be hating on them too much because we need them. So,
well, and again, there's one of the best books that I've ever read. Well, there's a number of different books, but one author is a guy named John Taylor Gatto, Gatto.
Yes.
And he wrote a book called Dumbing Us Down. Mm-hmm. And what's funny is, so check this out, the irony in this. So his book, it's a short book, easy read, so it is literally, he was the New York State
Teacher of the Year.
Yep. For like 30 years. Like, this guy is a teacher rock star. And this book is a collection of the acceptance speeches of all the awards he's ever received. And the topic is how
screwed up
his system to become teacher of the year in order to indoctrinate your children.
Yeah.
And he literally, he got the award. Hey, thank you so much. Here are the 7 things that I do in the classroom to indoctrinate your children. That was literally a whole book. It was fascinating. And the other one, so John Taylor Gatto's got some fascinating stuff. And again, this is not a knock on teachers. It's not, because I've got a lot of friends that are teachers, and that are great people. They love kids. It's just the system that's jacked up. And the other great book is called Why A Students Work for C Students and B Students Work for the Government. That's the name of the book. It's by Robert Kiyosaki.
Yep.
And it's fast. That one's a little bit old. Maybe 5-10 years old, but it's all principles and concepts. So it's a timeless, and I appreciate, again, as an entrepreneur, and a homeschooler, to be honest with you, I appreciate people that are willing to think outside their confirmation bias, right? Because a lot of people, it's the group think. It's the whole group think concept, right? Is, well, this is what society says. This is what the pundits say. This is what news media says. This is what social media says. Dude, think for yourself. Do you know, and honestly, I'm not necessarily trying to, plug CC, but one of the things that I appreciate about Classical Conversations is they teach the tools of how to learn. Not like, if I was a public school guy, here's what you have to learn. Here's the tools, the 5 common topics, the 5 canons of rhetoric, well, and even the 5 core habits for the grammar stage, so they give the tools. So what do you want to learn? You just stick in the topic in the top of the funnel, and out comes, you have this journey, this tools of learning, which again, as an entrepreneur, again, I feel is so critical. Critical thinking is critical to an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
And anyway, something that I'm super passionate about, because I'm passionate about entrepreneurship is another reason why I'm passionate about homeschooling, because I think it creates independent thinkers. Now, are there people who do homeschooling ways that I don't agree with? Sure, of course. Just like, some people say, well, what about socialization for homeschooling? Well, dude, have you been into a public high school? Like, go into a public high school and tell me that
that's everybody.
Right.
There's no socialization.
You know what I mean? You like, who said that the definition of socialization is to be with 30 other 5-year-olds with core values from parents that are completely different than your own?
Yeah.
And that is what proper socialization is, right? And this is another one thing I love too is, how many things have you done since you graduated college that are with everybody, that people the same age as you?
Not much.
It's not even real. It's
No.
not even real life, right?
No.
How many people at Chick-fil-A are all the same age, right? You got all kinds of different ages, right? Chick-fil-A and the jobs you've had, all that kind of stuff. Like, it doesn't even model real life. It's just, anyway, I'm getting all fired up, but I'm passionate about this stuff. Okay, wrapping up here. Your biggest advice to somebody that wants to become an entrepreneur, your biggest advice that you could give to somebody, man, I want to own my own business, or Chick-fil-A or whatever, they want to own their own business. What advice would you give someone?
I was going to say this in reference to what you were saying a minute ago. And I would say that a large part of my success in life has been to where, I look around and see what everybody else is doing, and I do the opposite. And so, and in some cases, not saying that you can't learn from other people, but like you said, think for yourself, and look for opportunity where no one else is looking. And I think there's a lot of wisdom in that. It's don't just replicate or mimic what everybody else is doing. That's where the true innovators and those that are successful come in, is when they start thinking, okay, well, I'm going to be myself, right? And I'm not going to try to replicate and be somebody else. And then by being themselves, they become authentic, and they become, someone that and people can see through everything else, really, whether you realize it or not. And then, but then in being yourself, you actually, are able to accomplish what you were always meant to accomplish, right? But what happens, I think, is we tend to just focus on what other people are doing, and try and, we see their successes, and we try to replicate that, or we try to copycat, and it's not going to get us to where we want to be. So I think that's probably my best advice is that, don't do what everybody else is doing. Look around, discover, innovate, do new ways of doing things. I'm a Chick-fil-A franchisee. There's 2,500 of us. But, you know, as you alluded to earlier, I mean, you know, you ask the president of Chick-fil-A, Tim Tasopoulos, who are some of the most influential people in the chain, and he'll throw out my name. And, you know, by the grace of God, you know, I am. And it's because I've done things differently. I go to, you know, Dr. Tim Elmore's conference every year, the National Leadership Forum, which he didn't do one last year, but, you know, and his conference is for educators, believe it or not. And he's basically saying the same thing John Gatto was saying, like, we're doing this wrong. We need to fix the education system. But you know, he's studying the generations, and that's what I love about Tim, you know, and he's been one of my, his name's Tim Elmore, growingleaders.com if you want to look him up. But he's a mentor of mine and a long-standing voice in my life.
Well, thank you so much, brother, for your time. I totally appreciate it. This has been absolutely phenomenal. And if you've seen the chat log there, it's been hopping and popping. I totally appreciate all the wisdom that you shared, Zach. And
Happy to help. Love you, man. I'll take care. Great to see you guys.
360.